They agreed to walk and talk, not to solve everything, but to understand each other better. He shared small pieces of his life, not everything, but more than he ever had with anyone else. She listened without judgment, without trying to fix him. She shared her fears too. The fear of being hopeful again. The fear of trusting the wrong person. The exhaustion of pretending not to care. They realized then that the connection between them was deeper than they had admitted. And that depth came with risk. For a while after that conversation, things felt lighter. They communicated more clearly. He made effort to explain when life pulled him away. She learned when to give space without feeling abandoned. But real life doesn't change overnight. Some days were still hard. Misunderstandings still happened. Silence still crept in when stress grew too loud. One evening, she canceled plans to meet him, not because she didn't want to see him, but because she felt overwhelmed. He took it personally. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. "No," she replied honestly. "I just need a quiet night." He didn't argue, but the doubt returned. Another time he forgot to show up when he had promised he would. Family called. Work delayed him. By the time he realized, it was too late. She waited longer than she should have. When they spoke again, tension filled the space. "This is starting to feel hard," she admitted. He nodded. "I know, and I don't want to lose you." Her heart softened at his honesty. But fear still stood its ground. "I don't want to lose myself either," she said. That sentence stayed with him. They reached a quiet understanding that Levef this was. Heading toward love was not a simple escape. It required patience, timing, and effort from both sides. They didn't define their relationship. They didn't make promises. But they acknowledged that what they shared mattered, as part 3 of their story unfolded. Both stood at a fragile turning point. The connection between them had deepened, but so had the challenges. They were learning that caring for someone also meant facing fears they had avoided for years. And that sometimes, the hardest part of growing closer is deciding whether you're brave enough to keep going. For now they stayed. Not because it was easy, but because something told them it was real. And real things, even when fragile, are worth holding carefully. The silence after their last difficult conversation stayed longer than either of them expected. It wasn't the kind of silence filled with anger. It was heavier than that. It was the kind that made both of them think too much. He went through his days on autopilot. Work, family, responsibilities. Everything that once kept him grounded now felt overwhelming. In quiet moments, her words replayed in his mind. Not accusations, not demands, just honest truths. He realized how rare that was. Most people shouted when they wanted to be heard. She didn't, and that fact stayed with him. He began to see a pattern in himself he had avoided for years. Whenever things mattered too much, he pulled back. Not because he didn't care, but because caring came with fear. Fear of failing. Fear of disappointing someone who trusted him. She struggled too. In a different way, she told herself she had done the right thing by speaking honestly. Still, doubt followed her. She questioned whether protecting her heart meant pushing people away too quickly. She didn't want to repeat old mistakes, but she also didn't want to become closed again. Some mornings, she looked at her phone longer than necessary, wondering if she should say something first. Then she stopped herself. Reaching out alone felt like weakening her boundary. Time passed slower during that space between them. Then one evening, something small but meaningful happened. He saw her from a distance at the bus stop. She stood with her arms crossed, staring straight ahead like she was trying not to think. For a moment he considered turning away. Avoidance was easier. But something in him shifted. He walked toward her. She sensed him before she saw him. When she turned, surprise crossed her face, followed quickly by something softer. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied. They stood awkwardly for a moment. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," he said. "A lot." She listened, cautious but open. "I realized I'm really bad at letting people be there for me," he continued. "And that's not fair to someone who's trying to meet me halfway." She didn't interrupt. She let him finish. I don't have everything figured out, he said, but I don't want fear to make my choices for me anymore. Her breath slowed. That means more than you know, she said quietly. They boarded the bus together and sat side by side for the first time. The closeness felt different now. More intentional. He spoke honestly on that ride. About being exhausted from always being strong. About how relying on himself had once been necessary, but now it had become a habit he couldn't break easily. She shared her own truth. That opening her heart again scared her more than loneliness ever had. That she didn't want perfection, just effort and clarity. They weren't solving everything, but they were listening, and that mattered. After that night, something changed in how they moved around each other. The tension softened. They checked in more. Even short messages made a difference. Not long conversations, just small signs of presence. He began to allow himself to say when days were hard instead of disappearing. It didn't come naturally, but he tried. She learned to accept that distance sometimes came from stress. It's not disinterest. Still, life continued to test them. One week, work demanded more than he could give. Deadlines stacked up. Family depended on him again. The old urge to shut down returned. This time, instead of pulling away completely, he told her, I might be quieter this week, he said one evening. Not because I want to be, but because I'm stretched thin. She appreciated the honesty. Thank you for telling me, she replied. I'll be here. That simple exchange felt like progress. She had her own difficult moments too. One day, unexpected news shook her sense of balance. She wanted to retreat into herself. When she told him she needed space, he didn't take it as rejection. He told her to take her time. These small adjustments didn't make things perfect. They made things real. One night, they sat together on a quiet bench, watching the city slow down around them. Cars passed. Lights flickered. People moved with purpose. Do you think love is supposed to feel easy? She asked. He thought for a moment. I think it's supposed to feel worth it, he said. She smiled softly. That makes sense? They sat there without speaking for a while. Comfortable in the silence they once feared. Later, as they walked toward their separate paths, she stopped. I need to know something, she said. He turned to face her completely. If this keeps growing, she continued, I need to know you'll choose honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. He held her gaze. I will, he said. And I need to know you'll tell me when you're scared, not just when you're strong. She nodded. I can do that. That night marked a quiet turning point. They didn't label things. They didn't rush forward. But they chose something important. They chose intention. Days turned into weeks. And their connection grew deeper through consistency. Shared meals. Longer walks. Laughter that came more easily now. He noticed how safe he felt around her. How he didn't have to explain himself all the time. She noticed how dependable he was in small ways. Showing up when he said he would. Sending a message when busy. They still argued softly at times. Misread tones. Missed moments. But they handled them differently now. Not defensively, but carefully. One evening, she said something that stayed with him. I like who I am when I'm around you, she said. He answered without hesitation. Me too. That realization scared him more than anything. Because now he knew what he stood to lose. There was a moment much later, when an opportunity came that could pull him away for a while. Better work, more money, less stability in their time together. He struggled with the decision. When he told her, he expected disappointment. Instead, she asked, What do you want? The question stunned him. No one had asked him that in years. I want to build something steady, he said slowly. Not just with work. With you? She smiled, eyes shining. Then let's build it together. As this stage of their journey came to an end, both felt it clearly. They were no longer just drifting toward something. They were choosing it. The fears hadn't disappeared. The challenges hadn't vanished. But they were facing them side by side now, and sometimes that simple choice is where love truly begins. Time has a way of showing what is real. Days turned into months, and life did what it always does. It kept happening. Nothing became perfect, but something became steady. He woke up before the alarm, the same way he had for years. Not because he wanted to, but because his mind never fully rested anymore. Even in sleep, worries waited. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the early morning. The world felt paused at that hour, like it was giving him one last chance to breathe before the day asked too much from him again. He moved slowly, careful not to waste energy. His routine was simple and almost automatic. Wash his face. Get dressed. Drink tea standing by the window. Outside, the street looked tired but familiar. Shops still closed. A few people already walking like they were late for something important. He often wondered if everyone felt this pressure, or if it was just him carrying too much inside. Life had trained him to expect little. Growing up, he learned early that nothing came easy. Dreams were nice, but responsibility came first. He worked hard, not because he loved his job, but because it paid the bills and kept his family steady. Over time, he stopped asking himself what he wanted. Survival slowly replaced hope. At the same time, somewhere across the city, she sat on the edge of her bed, holding her phone without looking at it. Messages stayed unanswered. Calls felt heavy. She had learned to be careful with expectations because they had disappointed her too many times before. Trust was something she once gave freely, and it cost her deeply. She tied her hair back and took a slow breath. Another day. Another attempt to move forward without looking back. She reminded herself that she was stronger now, even if she didn't always feel it. Love was not on her mind anymore. Peace was there. Worlds did not know about each other yet. They lived close enough to share the same air, but far enough to remain strangers. Fate had no dramatic plan planned for them that day. No music, no sign. Just ordinary moments lining up quietly. That afternoon, the city felt louder than usual. Heat pressed down on everything. People rushed, annoyed and impatient. He stopped by a small local place to pick up paperwork for work, a task he had done many times before. He stood in line, barely paying attention, his thoughts somewhere else. She walked in behind him, unaware of his presence. Her mind was busy replaying things she wished she had said in the past and worrying about things she could not control. When the line moved, she stepped forward and accidentally bumped into him. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice soft but sincere. He turned, surprised more by the sound of her voice than the moment itself. "It's okay," he replied without thinking. Their eyes met briefly. "Just a second." Nothing dramatic happened. No spark, no magical feeling. Just two people acknowledging each other before looking away. She smiled politely, then looked down. He turned back around. That was it. If someone had told either of them that this moment mattered, they would have laughed. Life had taught them not to believe in stories like that. Minutes later, as they both walked out separately, the memory of the interaction faded almost instantly. He thought about the long list of tasks waiting for him. She checked the time and hurried toward the bus stop. Should have been the end of it. But life has a quiet way of bringing people back. Together, when they aren't paying attention. Next few days passed like usual. Long hours. Little rest. He helped at home, sent money where it was needed, and tried not to think about how tired he felt all the time. Some nights, he sat alone with his thoughts and wondered how many years would pass before something changed. She kept herself busy too. Work filled most of her day, and when it didn't, her thoughts tried to drag her into the past. She avoided places that reminded her of who she used to be. She didn't believe she was broken, but she knew she was still healing. One evening, rain unexpected and heavy flooded the streets. He had stayed later than planned and now stood under a small shelter, waiting for it to slow down. Nearby, she arrived at the same spot. Soaking wet and clearly frustrated, she laughed to herself quietly, shaking rain from her sleeves. "Of course," she muttered. He noticed her then. Not right away. Just after a moment. Something about her seemed familiar, though he couldn't place it. She glanced over and recognized him too, her expression changing slightly with recognition. "You were at the office the other day?" she said. "Yeah," he he replied, nodding. Small world. They stood there, rain falling loudly between them. Silence filled the space, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just neutral, honest. It doesn't look like it's stopping soon, she said. No, he answered. It never does when you're in a hurry. She smiled. A real one this time. They spoke a little. Nothing deep. Complaints about the weather, about the city, about how unpredictable life could be. Her voice was calm, but carried a tired strength. His words were few, but thoughtful. When the rain slowed, they went their separate ways again. No numbers exchanged, no promises made. Still that night, both of them thought about the conversation more than they expected. He found himself wondering if she made it home dry. That thought surprised him. He brushed it off and went to sleep. She replayed the sound of his voice, not because it was special, but because it felt safe. She hadn't felt that in a while. Days later, their paths crossed again. Same bus, different seats. A brief smile. Another small talk moment. Routine slowly shifted. Neither of them named it. Neither questioned it too much. Life already felt difficult enough, yet without realizing it, something gentle had started. Not love, not romance. Just a quiet awareness of another person sharing the same space, the same tired days. He noticed things now. How she listened more than she spoke. How her smile reached her eyes, but faded quickly. She noticed that he always gave up his seat, always checked his phone before getting on the bus like he was responsible for more than himself. They were still strangers, but the distance between them had softened. Neither of them knew it yet. But this ordinary beginning was laying the foundation for something that would later feel extraordinary. For now, their lives continued as usual. Responsibilities waited. Worries stayed. The future remained uncertain, but embedded within their ordinary days was the quiet start of a story neither had planned. One that would slowly remind them that even tired hearts can learn to feel again, and that sometimes the most beautiful things don't announce themselves loudly. They arrived gently, disguised as everyday moments. Waiting to be noticed, the days that followed felt almost the same as before, yet not completely. Something small had shifted, though neither of them spoke about it. Life still moved fast and without mercy. Work demanded attention. Family duties waited without pause. Bills, schedules, and tired evenings continued, just as they always had. He still woke before his alarm. Still stared at the ceiling while the city slept. But now, sometimes his thoughts wandered to simple moments from the day before. A brief smile on a crowded bus, a short conversation that didn't feel forced. He didn't question why these memories stayed with him. He just let them pass through his mind and moved on. She still kept her phone silent most of the time, still protected her heart with distance and caution. Yet, while walking through familiar streets, she occasionally found herself scanning faces without realizing it. It annoyed her at first. She reminded herself that she wasn't looking for anything. She didn't need distractions. Then one morning, as the bus slowed to a stop, she saw him standing near the corner. He noticed her at the same time. Their eyes met, and this time neither looked away quickly. "Morning," he said as they stepped inside. "Morning," she answered. They didn't sit together. Not yet. They stood a short distance apart, holding on to the same worn metal pole, surrounded by the noise of traffic and quiet morning faces. No conversation followed. But there was comfort in knowing the other person was there. That day passed without anything special happening. Still, when she got off the bus, she caught herself smiling for no clear reason. Over time, these moments became familiar. Not predictable, but expected. A shared bus ride 2 or 3 times a week. Short greetings. A few exchanged looks. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Neither of them rushed it. When they did talk, the conversations were small, but real. Complaints about work, how exhausting the city felt, how traffic never improved no matter how many years passed. They laughed quietly at the same things, often surprised that someone else noticed the same details they did. One evening, the bus broke down halfway through the route. People groaned and complained. Some got off to walk the rest of the way. Others waited, checking their phones impatiently. They stepped off together, standing on the sidewalk unsure of what to do next. "Looks like we're walking," she said. "Looks like it," he replied. They started down the street side by side. The walk was longer than either expected, but neither suggested stopping. The city lights came on slowly, casting a soft glow over the road. For a while they walked in silence. "Do you ever feel like you're always in a hurry, even when you're not late?" she asked suddenly. He thought about it. "All the time," he said. "Like if I stop moving, something bad will catch up to me." She nodded. "Yes, exactly." That simple exchange opened something. Not wide, but enough. They talked more as they walked. About how life pushed people forward without asking if they were ready. About feeling responsible for others while forgetting themselves. Neither of them shared too much, but enough to be seen. When they reached the point where their paths separated, both felt the strange disappointment of wishing the walk was longer. "Take care," he said. "You too," she replied. That night, he found himself replaying the conversation again and again. Not because it was dramatic or deep, but because it felt honest. He had not pretended to be anything other than tired and trying. She lay awake longer than usual as well. It scared her a little how easy it felt to talk to him. She told herself not to read into it. People crossed paths all the time. This was no different, but it was. The following weeks brought more shared moments. Small conversations turned into slightly longer ones. He learned that she valued quiet more than noise. She learned that he carried responsibility quietly, never asking for help. One afternoon, he noticed she looked distracted. "Long day?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Just one of those days." He didn't push. He simply sat beside her in silence during the rest of the ride. That gesture stayed with her longer than words would have. Later on another day, he seemed unusually exhausted. "You okay?" she asked. "Just tired," he said. "But I'll manage." "You always say that," she replied gently. He smiled, surprised, she noticed. "I guess I do." They began to recognize each other's moods without explanation. A quiet understanding formed. It wasn't love, not yet. It was trust beginning to take shape. One evening, rain returned, softer this time. They shared the shelter again, standing closer than before. The city reflected in puddles at their feet. She spoke first. "Funny how the smallest changes can make days feel different." He nodded. "Yeah, like taking a different road and realizing it's calmer." She looked at him. Or meeting someone at the right time. He met her gaze and didn't look away. Maybe. Their words lingered between them longer than the rain. From that point on, their connection grew quietly stronger. They started waiting for the bus together. Sometimes he walked with her a few streets past his usual stop. Sometimes she waited while he picked up something for home. Neither talked about the future. Neither spoke about love. They existed in the present, where things felt simple and safe. Still, deep inside, both felt something stirring. He began to wonder what her laughter would sound like on a good day, not a tired one. She wondered what it would feel like to trust again without fear. But fear was still there. There were days she pulled back slightly, responding with fewer words. He noticed but didn't ask. He respected the distance because he understood needing space. There were days he seemed lost in thought, burdened by things he didn't share. She sensed it and stayed patient. Life didn't suddenly become beautiful. Problems didn't disappear. But in the middle of routine, a sense of calm had found its way into their days. One night, as they parted ways, she turned back unexpectedly. "I'm glad our paths crossed," she said quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Me too." Those two words stayed with them longer than they expected. They didn't know it yet, but emotional doors they had kept closed for years were slowly opening. Not all at once. Just enough to let light in. The connection growing between them was still fragile. Built on ordinary moments and shared understanding. But even fragile things can become strong if handled with care. As part 2 of their story came to an unspoken close, both of them were standing at the edge of something new. Not love declared, Not promises made, but the quiet awareness that life felt a little less heavy when someone walked beside you. And sometimes, that is how the most meaningful stories begin. Life did not pause just because something gentle was growing between them. It kept moving forward, sometimes faster than either of them wanted. Work became heavier for him. One responsibility turned into another, and soon his days felt tightly packed with things that depended on him. He smiled through tiredness and told himself it was temporary. It's the way he always did. She noticed the change before he spoke about it. He checked his phone more often now. Sometimes he arrived late to the bus stop, breathing harder than usual. On some days, he didn't show up at all. When that happened, she told herself not to feel disappointed. She reminded herself they had no promises, no shared plans. Still, the empty space beside her felt louder than before. When they did meet, conversations became shorter. Not cold, just distracted. He listened, but his mind often drifted. She felt it and tried not to take it personally, but old fears slowly returned. She had felt this distance before with people she trusted, right before things fell apart. One evening, they walked together after getting off the bus. The sky was cloudy, heavy with coming rain. She spoke, then stopped halfway through her sentence. "You're not really here, are you?" she asked softly. He stopped walking. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's just a lot going on." She nodded, but the answer didn't ease her. "There's always a lot going on," she replied. "I just didn't want to feel invisible." Her honesty surprised him. He hadn't realized how much his silence had affected her. "You're not invisible," he said quickly. "I just don't like dragging people into my problems." She looked at him. "Sometimes sharing isn't dragging. Sometimes it's trusting," said nothing. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to explain a lifetime of carrying things alone. They continued walking. The space between them heavier than before. When they reached the point where they usually parted, neither lingered. That night, he lay awake longer than usual. Her words echoed in his mind. Trust. It was a word he respected but feared. Depending on someone felt risky. He had learned early that things could fall apart without warning. She, on the other hand, replayed the moment again and again, wondering if she had said too much. Opening up always came at a cost. She promised herself she wouldn't chase or beg for attention. If something was meant to grow, it would. The following days tested that belief. They missed each other on the bus more often. When they did meet, smiles felt thinner. The ease they once shared felt replaced by caution. Neither wanted to hurt the other, yet neither knew how to bridge the growing gap. Then, after noon, everything shifted. He received a call that changed the shape of his week. A family matter that needed immediate attention. Travel plans. Extra expenses. Sudden pressure. His world narrowed down to responsibility and urgency. In the rush of it all, he forgot to explain. Days passed without messages or meetings. He told himself he would reach out once things settled, not realizing how quiet he had already become in her life. She noticed his absence immediately at first. She assumed work had taken over. Then days passed. A week, no sign. No shared bus rides. No waiting under shelters. The silence felt familiar in the worst way. Her thoughts turned uncomfortable. Had she expected too much? Had she misunderstood everything? She tried to stay busy, but the spaces he once occupied felt empty. She didn't want to believe the same pattern was repeating itself. But fear whispered anyway. When they finally crossed paths again, it happened unexpectedly at the same corner where they had first met. She almost didn't recognize him. He looked thinner, tired in a different way. "Hey," he said, clearly relieved. "Hey," she replied, cautious. "I'm sorry I disappeared," he said quickly. "Things got complicated." She waited. He noticed. "I should have told you sooner," he continued. "I just didn't know how." She exhaled slowly. "I wasn't waiting for an explanation," she said. "I was just hoping not to feel forgotten." The truth landed hard. "I would never forget you," he said quietly. "Then don't vanish," she replied. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired, They stood there, surrounded by passing people, neither moving. Finally he spoke. "My whole life, I've had to handle things on my own," he said. "Letting someone in feels like risking more than I can manage right now." She nodded. "I understand that more than you think," she said. "But I can't keep guessing where I stand." The honesty between them was unfiltered and vulnerable. It scared both of them. They settled into a rhythm that felt natural. Mornings still came early for him, but now sometimes a short message waited on his phone, wishing him a good start. It didn't remove his worries, but it softened the edges. He carried that softness with him through crowded streets and long hours. She continued to protect her peace, but she no longer felt alone while doing it. There was comfort in knowing someone understood when she went quiet, someone who didn't demand explanations, only honesty. They learned each other slowly. Not through big moments, but through small ones that repeated over time. How he liked his tea strong when mornings felt heavy. How she walked a little faster when her thoughts grew loud. How silence between them no longer felt like distance. Life still tested them. There were weeks when money felt tight and stress filled the air. There were family issues that pulled him in different directions. There were days she struggled with old memories coming back without warning. On those days, they didn't fix each other. They simply stayed present. Sometimes that meant sitting quietly on a bench after sunset. Other times it meant walking side by side without talking, letting the sound of footsteps do the work. One evening, he arrived late again, not out of habit, but circumstance. When he saw her waiting, guilt crept in. "I'm sorry," he said. She smiled gently. "You told me it would be a long day. I believed you." That trust touched him more deeply than she realized. He hadn't grown up with trust given so freely. It was something he had learned to earn through effort and consistency. Knowing she believed him made him want to do better, not out of fear, but care. As time passed, the idea of the future stopped feeling distant. They didn't plan it loudly, but they spoke about small things. Shared meals, weekend walks. What a peaceful life might look like. One night, as rain tapped softly against a window, she asked, "Do you ever miss who you used to be?" He thought for a long time. "I think I miss who I thought I'd become," he said. "But I don't miss where I was." She nodded slowly. "I think I understand." They realized then how much they had changed simply by letting someone care. There was a moment, months later, when life tried to pull them apart again. He was offered work that promised stability but required distance. Old fears returned. He worried about risking something good for something uncertain. He shared the truth with her, not hiding behind strong words or silence. "I don't want to lose what we're building," said. She reached for his hand, steady and calm. "Then let's talk about it." Not everything has to be decided today. They talked. Honestly, carefully, about sacrifices, about patience, about what mattered most. There were no raised voices, no ultimatums. In the end, they chose balance, not the easiest option, but the one that protected both growth and connection. That choice became a definition of their love, not dramatic, not perfect, just thoughtful. They celebrated small wins, a good week, a solved problem, a quiet evening that felt like home. There was a day she caught herself laughing freely without checking the room for safety. That realization made her pause. She hadn't done that in years. There was a night he fell asleep without running tomorrow's worries through his head. Waking up calm surprised him. They noticed these changes in themselves. "You help me breathe," she told him once, her voice soft. "You remind me I'm human," he replied. Their bond wasn't built on loud promises or constant excitement. It was built on showing up, on choosing kindness when tired, on listening even when it was uncomfortable. There were disagreements, of course. Moments when frustrations surfaced, but they learned to pause instead of pushing, to explain instead of accusing, to repair instead of retreat. One evening, as they walked the same streets where everything had begun, she smiled. "Do you ever think about how we started?" She asked. "All the time," he said. "It still surprises me." "Me too," she admitted. I didn't believe simple things could change a life." He looked at her and saw not a perfect person, but a familiar soul, someone who felt like calm after a long storm. Time continued forward. Seasons changed. Faces in the city came and went, but their connections stayed rooted in everyday life. In shared routines, in quiet understanding, there came a day when standing together didn't feel like effort. It felt like rest. On that day, nothing special happened. No celebration. No announcement. They simply realized, together, that love had quietly healed parts of them they thought were permanent. He no longer felt like he had to carry everything alone. She no longer felt like she had to guard her heart constantly. They hadn't fixed each other. They had met each other, and that made all the difference. As the story finds its gentle ending, one truth stands clear: love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up as patience, as honesty, as someone choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. For them, love became the soft place life rested at the end of hard days. And for anyone watching from the outside, their story reminds us that the most beautiful love stories aren't about perfection. They're about two people who made ordinary days feel meaningful, simply by walking through them together. Life did not freeze after peace arrived. It kept moving forward, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. But now they moved with it instead of fighting it. What they had built was not fragile anymore. It wasn't loud either. It was steady, and that made all the difference. Their days became shaped by shared routines. Not routines that trapped them, but ones that grounded them. Mornings that started with quiet understanding. Evenings that ended without the need to explain exhaustion. They learned when to talk and when silence was enough. He began to change in ways even he didn't notice immediately. People around him saw it first. He looked less tense. His voice carried less weight. When problems came, he approached them without panic. Knowing someone believed in him gave him strength he hadn't known he was allowed to feel. She changed too. The sharp edges around her heart softened. She still protected herself, but no longer from love. From unnecessary pain, yes, but not from connection. She allowed herself moments of joy without questioning how long they would last. They did not become perfect partners. They became honest ones. There were still disagreements, small ones and sometimes heavy ones, about time, about priorities, about the future. But now, arguments didn't feel like threats. They were conversations meant to be survived, not won. One evening, after a particularly long week, they sat together in quiet exhaustion. The city outside buzzed with noise, but their space felt calm. "Do you ever get scared that peace can disappear?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. "Sometimes," he said, "but I'm more scared of never allowing myself to enjoy it." Those words stayed with her. Not every day felt meaningful. Some days felt boring, repetitive, ordinary, and that was something they learned to appreciate. Ordinary meant safe. Ordinary meant stable. They supported each other through moments nobody else saw. Silent worries, long pauses, decisions that carried weight. He stood by her during a difficult personal season. When emotions came without reason and energy felt hard to find, he didn't try to fix her. He stayed. She stood by him when responsibility threatened to swallow him again. She reminded him that rest was not weakness. In time, their connection became something they didn't need to question. It felt less like falling and more like standing. There came a day, quiet and unplanned, when they talked about the future in a way that surprised them both. "Do you ever think about where you want to be in a few years?" she asked. "I used to avoid that question," he admitted. "Now it doesn't scare me as much." That honesty mattered. They talked about values more than dreams, about kindness, about choosing peace over noise, about building something that didn't look impressive from the outside, but felt meaningful inside. As time passed, life offered new challenges, unexpected changes, tough choices, moments that tested patience. They failed sometimes. They miscommunicated. They hurt each other without meaning to, but they always returned to the same place, on night. After a misunderstanding left tension in the air, she said something that marked how far they had come. "I'm upset," she said, "but I'm not going anywhere." He felt the weight of that promise. "I'll do better," he said, and for the first time he truly believed it. They grew older together in small, invisible ways. Less urgency, more understanding, fewer expectations, deeper care. The city around them kept changing. New buildings, new faces, new routines. But they remained rooted in something simple. There were moments of laughter that came out of nowhere, moments of gratitude that arrived quietly, moments when they realized how different life felt now compared to before. One evening, walking the familiar streets again, she said, "You know, I don't feel tired of trying anymore." He smiled. "Neither do I." That statement meant more than any grand declaration. They did not measure their love by milestones. They measured it by how safe it felt to be themselves. On a calm morning, he watched her move around the room, focused and peaceful. "This feels like home," he said. She looked at him and nodded. It does. The word once felt heavy to both of them. Now it felt earned. Time continued, as it always does. The story others saw from outside never looked dramatic. No big moments. No perfect timelines. Just two people choosing each other daily, and that was what made it beautiful. They never forgot the people they used to be. The tired versions. The guarded versions. The ones who didn't believe love could be gentle. Those people still lived inside them, but no longer carried the weight of the present. One quiet night, she said something that closed the circle of their journey. "I'm glad we didn't rush," she said. "I'm glad we listened," he agreed. "If we had, we might have missed this." As this chapter comes to rest, their story doesn't end. It settles into consistency, into warmth, into trust. Their love did not save the world. It saved something smaller, yet more important. It saved them from believing they had to face life alone. And sometimes, that is the most beautiful ending of all. Life had settled into something calm, but calm did not mean empty. It meant steady. It meant breathing without fear. And yet, even steady waters have deeper currents underneath. As time passed, they began to notice how much they had grown, not just together, but individually. The version of him who once carried everything alone now allowed himself to ask for help. He no longer saw it as weakness. He saw it as trust. She no longer questioned every good moment. She stopped waiting for happiness to end suddenly. When joy arrived, she let it stay still. Growth brought reflection. One quiet afternoon, they sat by a window watching the city move slowly below. People hurried past, chasing things they couldn't name. "Do you ever feel like things are too quiet now?" she asked, not with fear, but curiosity. He smiled slightly. "Sometimes, but I think that's because chaos felt familiar before." She nodded. "Yes, peace felt strange to me at first." They laughed softly together. That conversation stayed with them longer than they realized. As months went by, questions they had never rushed began to surface naturally. Not demands. Just gentle wonderings about the shape of life ahead. Where home truly was. What kind of future felt right. He found himself thinking less about survival and more about meaning. About balance. About leaving space for joy without guilt. She reflected on how far she had come from protecting herself at all costs to trusting someone with her silence and her happiness. Their love did not move fast. It deepened. Then life introduced something they could not ignore. Change. A shift in circumstances created uncertainty. Not a crisis, but a crossroads. A moment that asked them to look beyond comfort and toward purpose. He faced a choice that carried weight. A new opportunity that aligned with personal growth but required stepping out of familiar patterns. It wasn't about money or status. It was about direction. He wrestled with it quietly at first. She noticed something was bothering him. His pauses were longer. His thoughts drifted further away. One evening, she gently asked, "What are you carrying right now?" He exhaled. I'm trying to decide who I want to become next." That honesty opened the space between them. They talked deeply that night, about fears that still lingered, about how change often brings loss along with promise. "I don't want us to lose what we have," he admitted. She responded with a calm certainty he hadn't expected. "We won't lose it by growing. We'd lose it by staying silent." Her words shifted something inside him. Instead of reacting with fear, they chose conversation. They talked through every concern slowly, every doubt, every hope. They reminded each other that love wasn't meant to freeze life in place, but to walk alongside it as it moved. That realization grounded them. He chose growth without abandoning stability. She chose support without losing herself. The process wasn't immediate. Adjusting took time. Some days felt unbalanced. Others felt rewarding. There were nights when exhaustion returned, when patience stretched thin, but every challenge was met with the same question: how do we move forward together? That question became their anchor. As their bond matured further, something surprising happened. They began to feel gratitude for their past pain. Not because it was easy, not because it was fair, but because it shaped their ability to love gently. They knew how fragile hearts could be, and so they treated each other with care. One quiet evening, she shared a thought she had carried for days. "I used to think love had to be intense to be real," she said. "Now I think it just has to be consistent." He smiled. "I wish I had learned that sooner." Realized then that their story was not controlled by fate or luck. It was built by daily choices. There were moments when the world tested that. Truth stress returned unexpectedly. Responsibilities stacked again. Old habits tried to resurface. This time, he noticed the signs early. Instead of shutting down, he spoke. "I'm starting to feel overwhelmed," he said. She didn't panic. She listened. They adjusted. They slowed where needed. They supported rather than pressured. She, too, faced moments when her past whispered doubts, when her instinct to withdraw threatened to return. Instead of disappearing, she said, "I'm feeling scared again." He responded with presence, not questions. That mutual openness became their greatest strength. Time went on. Days blended into routines that felt warm, not exciting to outsiders, but deeply fulfilling. They cooked together. They shared quiet mornings. They laughed over simple things, and every now and then, they would look at each other and silently acknowledge how far they had come. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled softly across the room, she asked a question she had never asked before. "Do you feel proud of your life?" He paused. "Yes," he said after a moment. "Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest." That answer resonated with her. Later, walking through familiar streets, he asked her something in return. "Do you feel at peace now?" She thought carefully. "More than I ever thought possible." They didn't cling to happiness. They allowed it. They knew that life would continue to change, that challenges would come and go, but they had learned something unshakable. Love was not magic. It was effort without resentment. It was truth spoken. Calmly, it was staying curious about each other as their journey continued. It became clear that their story was not about dramatic endings or perfect beginnings. It was about choosing softness in a hard world, choosing patience over fear, choosing each other, again and again. And in doing so, they had created something rare. Not a story that dazzled, but one that endured.